question. I have a question that nobody can answer. So, so I've stopped asking it. And it's not that I don't understand things. I understand lots of things. I understand things better than most kids my age. My mom says that thank you. My mom says that I understand things better than she does. But that's probably because she can't read. But but also because she's my mom and all of that. But hey, I think it's important to try and understand things for yourself. That's what I think.
A stateless person is someone who doesn't have any nationality. So most people in the world have a nationality. They belong to a country, and we take it for granted, therefore, that everyone has a citizenship. I'm a Sri Lankan citizen. You are a Sri Lankan citizen. Most people belong to one country or another in the world. But there are some people who, for various reasons, are not recognized by any country as their own citizen. And that is the definition of a stateless person. By the very nature of the problem, it's very difficult to sometimes identify stateless people. These are people who are more likely not to have documents, who are more likely not to be counted in censuses, and so they are more likely to be underestimated. But still, there are some general estimations of the stateless population. So the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, which is the UN agency which has a mandate to work on statelessness, it has estimated in the past that there are at least 10 million stateless people in the world, of which it has actually counted 3.75 million. But if you look at the UN figures, these are actually incomplete because they do not count people who are both stateless and refugees. A refugee is someone who has fled their country because they're escaping persecution. And UNHCR counts those people in its refugee statistics and not its statelessness statistics. Similarly, there are Palestinians who are stateless who are not counted in the UNHCR statistics. So my organization, when we talk about the global statelessness population, we talk about at least 15 million, which is the 10 million people who are estimated by UNHCR, plus another 1.5 million or so who are both stateless and refugees, and another 3.5 million, roughly, who are stateless Palestinians.
Like I believe, kids and adults live in two different worlds. And it's not that one world is full of balloons and colors and shorter lisping people and stuff. No. It's like we live in worlds of different rules. One set of rules for the kids, and the adults have another set of rules, but for the very same thing.
One thing I find very difficult about the issue is the underlying injustice behind statelessness and the structural racism, misogyny, xenophobia, which often is the root cause of statelessness. And so, in that sense, statelessness is quite similar to some of the biggest global challenges that we see, issues of apartheid and race discrimination and sexism. And statelessness is another kind of symptom of those types of deeper problems. But what I find very challenging is that for many people working on statelessness, they perceive it not in this way, but more in terms of something that can be fixed quite easily if a country changes its laws. What they do not recognize, or what they do not adequately recognize, is that there's often a reason why countries have particular laws, or there's often a reason why, even if the country's laws may be quite good on paper, they are not actually implemented in that way in reality. And I find that very frustrating. So working in this field, where we're often kind of countering forces who are powerful and who have the ability to change things, but they perceive things in a much narrower, more simplistic way, uh, which perhaps is their way of also not confronting the difficult issues. And I find that challenging, but that's more about the statelessness field than about the statelessness issue. In terms of the issue, what I find most difficult is probably the impact it has on people. Over the years, I've befriended lots of people who are stateless, and to to see people who you value as your friends, who you value for their worth as human beings and for the very unique skills and perspectives that they have to offer. When you see them being reduced to someone who is a shell without an identity, being reduced to someone whose only role is to stand up on a platform and talk about their case study, or being reduced to someone who cannot even do the basics in terms of providing for their children, securing their future, traveling to another town, simply because of this lack of a status. It's heartbreaking to see that, and that drives home really how much this world has moved in the direction of placing process and procedure and policy and regulations over people. And I think we've come to a situation where laws which are meant to serve people actually subjugate people, and that's by design. It's not by accident. And seeing this impact, I mean, I can talk about it at a theoretical level, but I've seen it at a personal level in terms of my friends. One of my friends is a Bahrainian former MP who was visiting the UK, and because he was a leading opposition voice, while he was in the UK, he was stripped of his citizenship. He's never been able to go back to his home country since then. And I can tell you many other stories of people like that. And just to see the way this taking away this one thing, or not giving you access to one thing to begin with, which really is something quite artificial, the idea of a nationality, it's a man-made construct. But either withholding that or withdrawing it, the impact that can have on people in terms of their relationships, their lives, their quality of life, their dignity, that to me that's one of the most frustrating things.
My mother, she likes to take me with her when we have to go out and sort out our lives. This generally means a lot of time spent standing in queues and filling out forms and writing out letters and telling our story over and over and over again. My mother never seems to get tired of telling our story. I'm frankly sick of it.
So my organization is the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion, and we set the institute up 5 years ago. And the child's right to nationality is one of the 5 thematic areas we prioritize. There are a number of reasons behind this. I think one of the most compelling reasons, or two of the most compelling reasons, I would say. One is that the idea of a child being born into statelessness is a deeply impactful and a powerful one, because childhood is both about the present and about the future. And a child who is stateless is denied both their present, their right to be a child, to play, to have fun, to be curious, to grow, and their future rights, the foundation that as a child they will get, which will stand them in good stead when they become adults. So accessing quality education, accessing healthcare, being able to travel, etc. And so for that reason, the right to nationality, we believe it's a foundational right. It's what we call an enabling right, because it's a right which you are entitled to in and of itself, but it's also a right which then allows you to enjoy your other rights a little more easily and to have more access to them. So if I'm a child who has citizenship, I will not be questioned when my parents register me in school. Whereas if I'm a child who doesn't have citizenship, I might have trouble accessing school. So there, that child is then twice wronged. They are wronged in terms of denying them their citizenship, and they are wronged again in terms of denying themselves access to their education. The other reason why we focused so heavily on child rights is because uh, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC, is one of the strongest human rights instruments that we have at our disposal. It's the treaty which has been signed onto or ratified, as they say, by the most number of countries in the world. Every single country other than the United States of America has signed onto the CRC. And the CRC has some very important provisions. So Article 7 of the CRC talks about the child's right to acquire a nationality, and goes on to say that the state has a special responsibility to protect this right if the child would otherwise be stateless. And what this means is that most states will have their own rules as to how you become a citizen. In many countries, you will become a citizen if your parents are citizen. In other countries, you will become a citizen if you were born in that country, even if your parents are not citizens. Sometimes it's a mix of those two systems. So any country will have its own system, but what the CRC says is that's fine, you can have that system, but if there's a child who for whatever reason doesn't fit within that system and is born in your country and would otherwise be stateless, you have an obligation to grant that child a nationality. So that's a very strong provision. And then the CRC has another one of its guiding principles. It's the principle of the best interest of the child. That when anything a state does in relation to a child, one of the primary considerations must be the best interest of the child. And being stateless can never be in the best interest of the child. Similarly, there's a very strong provision against discrimination in the convention. So there's a very strong legal basis to work on the issue of childhood statelessness and to address statelessness at the point at which a child is at risk of statelessness when they're born. And for these are some of the reasons why we've prioritized this. Just one more thing that I would like to say is that if you look at why people become stateless or are made stateless, there are various reasons which are given. But by and large, the biggest reason is inheriting statelessness of your parents. So the reason we have so many children stateless, there's one estimate that a child is born stateless every 10 minutes, that's probably a conservative estimate, is because there are large populations, large communities that are stateless, and adults in those communities, they don't have the ability to pass on their nationality to their children. They don't have a nationality to pass on. So by focusing on childhood statelessness and saying every child has a right to a nationality, it doesn't matter whether parents are stateless or refugees or migrants or have moved to a country irregularly, all that matters is that this child has a right that needs to be respected and protected. And that for us is a very strong and compelling argument to make. And those are some of the reasons why we focus so heavily on this issue.
Well, I learned that the moment you are born till the time you die, you are spending each moment and your account is being slowly emptied. Let the time being spent is worthwhile because there is no reimbursement. One cannot pause their life for a moment even and say that I will come back tomorrow and replay my life. So any form of rules, regulations that bar human life to live to its full extent is the most heinous crime. But sadly, this crime has been committed by our own authorities or the people in the power. I have also learned that humanity still exists as long as the little bird called hope is there. So when I reached out my hands for help, honestly, my world changed. The road might be very, very long, but trust me, even the castle of the foe, you will find friends. Just that my mantra has been determination for centuries, I say.
A few years ago, a colleague and I started working on a book about statelessness for children. And the reason we started working on this book is because we'd actually, as an organization, we'd done a lot of research and writing on childhood statelessness. but we hadn't written anything for children, and we felt that we were making a mistake and missing a trick by not doing so. So we decided to write a book about statelessness for children. And this book, it's called The Girl Who Lost Her Country. It's based on a real child who was stateless. And in the book, we've taken this real person and we've fictionalized her character. And she travels around the world meeting other children who are stateless, other parents of children who are stateless. And every character she meets is also based on real people. And through this girl Neha going around the world meeting these people, we were taken on a journey with her and we learned about statelessness. And once we produced the book, or once we were actually compiling and gathering materials towards the book, we thought that we're doing something here which has a lot of potential, and we should think beyond just the book as well. So we started looking at what else we can do, how else can we kind of try and engage with children creatively on statelessness. And one of the methods we used was this play. So the play was commissioned, and it was commissioned initially as really as a short story, but it came out as a monologue, which then was something that was actually very suitable to be performed.
Like, we learn in school that policemen are good and that governments look after people and it's bad to lie and that all children are special and la-di-da and everyone has equal rights, but, well, nothing about my life's been like that. It was confusing for a very long time. And then I just decided that adults lie.
The basis for the book, as well as the basis for this short story and other pieces, it's all grounded in research. It's all grounded in various people's interviews, testimonies, conversations, and we gathered all of this material. We shared it with different people who were contributing towards this process. And so the play also, it picks out some of the issues which come across. And so when the play was performed at the conference, the girl Neha, who is the protagonist of the book, was at the conference, and her mother Deepthi was also at the conference. And the journey of the child in the story is very similar to the experiences that Deepthi and Neha would have had, because Deepthi spent her children's entire childhood being humiliated, being abused, being disregarded, being denied as she approached different men in power, as she puts it, small men behind big desks, who had the authority and the discretion to grant her children citizenship, but who would simply deny it and who would question her own morals and ask why the father of the children was not there, and find various ways to humiliate her. But she persisted. She's an incredibly strong woman, and Neha is an incredibly strong young woman now. And they got their citizenship sorted out eventually. Deepthi and Neha and the younger sister Nikita, they're quite exceptional in many ways. They're exceptional people, but many people who actually are in this situation where they have to confront the state, they don't have that inner strength, they don't have that inner confidence, they may not be as articulate, they may not be as aware of their own rights to persist and to pursue this. So you often come across people who, just by virtue of being of a lower class or being illiterate, are not able to access their rights because their first point of contact with the state is a person who will throw their power around and abuse their discretion. But these people don't know that. They think that what they're confronting is the norm and is the way things are. And yes, it's the way things are, but it's not the way things should be, because these are people who are abusing their power to deny people of what they are entitled to. So yes, a lot of the things that come across in the play are very real, they're very close to home, and also again through the use of art, the play, you're able to say things which cannot be said in other means. As a human rights NGO, I cannot write a report saying adults in positions of power lie. If I do that, and if I don't back it up extensively with quotes and with citations and research, I will be in trouble. Whereas we all know that people lie, and we all have plenty of anecdotal evidence of when individuals confront sites of power, the response is lies and denials. But in this play, the child can say adults lie, and everyone listening to that play will take note of that, and their response isn't going to be one of defensiveness. Their response isn't going to be one of denial of how dare you. Whereas if an NGO said that in a report, that would be the response.
My mother never seems to get tired of telling our story. I'm frankly sick of it. But my mother, she knows how to tell our story. She knows the voice, the expression, all of it. It's like clicking a switch. So, tell us your story. Click. It's like that.
I didn't know anything about statelessness, which was surprising because when I read about it, it felt like it should have been something that everybody knows about. I didn't know exactly what it was until I read the resource packets that I got, and had to do research to understand the character that I was playing, and that's when I realized that this is a problem that is way bigger than it's like portrayed to be. When I first began understanding what statelessness was, it was an unsettling feeling to understand that there were so many children like myself who were non-existent, who just didn't exist on paper. So they were uncared for, they didn't have any opportunities to learn or to grow or to opportunities that every child should have and has the right to have. So I had to fully come to terms with the problem at hand, with statelessness itself, and wrap my head around that concept and to understand that, okay, people like this existed and yes, this was a problem. But then after doing that research and understanding the statistics and the depth of the problem, then it was more about understanding the people it involved and how emotional this issue really is. Because in order to do justice to the character that I was playing, I really needed to understand the level of pain that they were coming from, which is something that I can't relate to. I can't even imagine it, but I needed to somehow find that place of loneliness, of pain, in order to kind of bring out the sensitivity and the emotional depth of the character. So I read about different people's stories, mostly children, so that I could relate to them better than I could relate to adults. In the monologue itself, my character is not unlike myself, ambitious, doing everything under the sun, and then to think that none of it mattered. So I really had to. It was a lot of self-reflection as well. It was not just putting on a show; it was becoming that character for me.
I was participating at the World Conference on Statelessness at Netherlands, Hague, in the summer of 2019. It was my first time to participate in such a huge conference. I was excited but very much nervous because it was for the first time. So I was nervous from inside. The conference took place just after I had succeeded in acquiring citizenship for my 2 daughters and my husband. So, after 10 long years of the battle, the final victory had a very, very strong impact on my family. On the opening day of the conference, towards the end, question and answers were taken from the podium to the audience. I was keenly observing. A girl raised her hand from the audience side and said, "I have a question too." So when she rose from the seat and asked powerful questions, the room fell silent. I had no clue that it was a performance, the same performance certificate. So she had files in one hand, and her question as a stateless youth became more and more stronger as she moved towards the people on the stage. It felt like she was pouring hot iron on my soul, because many days of countless walks around government offices, my dark days and nights, gloomy future and grim faces of my family all came looming in front of my eyes. So much my soul had cried in the darkness, it felt like through the girl who was performing, my pain from the past had found a voice in the open for the first time. My suppressed fear, loneliness, and profound pain melted from my eyes. And with her every word, I was reminded of all the still hopeful faces of young stateless kids back home. My heart prayed for the strength and the determination that would stand as a rock on my path to justice for the stateless people of my country.
My mum's a really clever woman, and while she can't necessarily read words and letters, she can read people's faces, their expressions. And she knows what someone's going to say before they even say it. Maybe before they even know what they're going to say. And it's probably why she talks without stopping, just in case she can get in what she can say before the person even knows what they're going to say back. And me, well, I've just stopped asking the questions we're never going to get answers to.
I think of all the ways I've performed it, the intervention was my favorite, because then it was, people weren't expecting a show, and then there's less closure where people can't say, okay, she was just acting, and now we can close that chapter and go about our lives. Where in an intervention, it was this sense of not knowing whether, okay, is this real? And then I remember afterwards having to explain to so many people that I wasn't actually a stateless person, that what the intervention was about, and the fact that people thought even at the end of it, when it was pretty clear that it was a performance, the fact that they thought that it wasn't, I think that was my goal. And in every performance, whether it was an intervention or at a panel, the first thing I do is look around for the hardest or the coldest face in the audience. Either the official who is like bored of the whole panel, or the person who looks like they're falling asleep, and that's the person I pick. And my goal would be to reach that person, to be able to make them understand, look, this is not something you can be sleeping on, this is not something you can be tired of or sick of. So that was my favorite part about doing this, being able to make people uncomfortable, because making people uncomfortable is the only way you can get something done, because when people are comfortable, then people become selfish. It was interesting sitting in the audience, because I was obviously nervous and acting jittery, and I suppose that played well with my character, but it also gave me the opportunity to observe the people I was about to perform to. And I remember picking a couple of people who were on their phones during the whole opening plenary. There was one gentleman who had his laptop open, and I think he was working on a presentation or something for work. And I remember just looking at him and thinking, he's the person I'm going to talk to today. And I thought, okay, this is a good thing, because I'm in the audience's side. I'm on the audience's side right now, and I am a part of the audience now. And I can see things that people on stage can't. And I also got a few weird looks here and there. I think people were thinking, okay, what is this strange child doing here, just sitting in the middle with these big files of, I don't even know, tattered files. I remember putting my hand up, and then they didn't call me for a while. they weren't picking my question, and people around me started like saying, okay, wait, she has a question, because I just didn't put my hand down. And then when I started, everybody just turned because I was at the back and everybody was looking at me. And so then I began and I started doing everything the way I was supposed to do. And I remember not thinking about what was happening. It was, I wasn't thinking about the lines, I wasn't thinking about what I was supposed to do. It was just about looking I was trying to look every single person in the eye. That was my goal, to look at them and to make them understand what it is I was trying to say. But it was also an interesting experience to observe people and how they reacted to me, because afterwards there were the people who came and just hugged me and cried, complete strangers who were just hugging me and crying. And there were those who came and offered to help me and were just like asking me about my documents and whether they were in order, and then I had to explain to them what it was, what happened. And then there were those who came and spoke to me about the work they did and about how this has never happened before at the conferences they've been to and all of that. So there were so many different reactions to it, but I think the common message or the common response that I got was, we weren't expecting that, and that hit us from left field, like from nowhere. And everybody was like shaky at the end of it, and everybody seemed uncomfortable, which is what I was the most happy about.
Whenever we have to go and sort out our lives, we take our documents file with us. And before and after every meeting, Mama gets me to count the documents in this documents file and put them in order. There are 63 documents. Without the photocopies.
To me personally, it has always been very important to work through the arts, and not just on statelessness. I mean, I have a background as a human rights lawyer, and in all my work, it has been very important to bring in the arts into what we do. Personally, I have a background where I was part of a theatre group, and our group was very much involved in working on issues of social justice and addressing them through the arts. And so I had first-hand experience of how when you approach an issue through the arts, you compel the audience to engage with it differently. And to me, it was very important to bring this type of difference into how we do our work, for a number of reasons. I mean, in one of my early answers, I mentioned that there has been a reluctance, for example, among some of the bigger agencies, for example, to look at the really deep underlying issues, which are the reason why people are stateless. And these are issues which are very human issues. It's how people relate to each other, how they put barriers up, how they overcome those barriers. And talking about these very human challenges and issues in a legalistic way or in a sociological way, it's important, but there are limitations to that kind of approach. And there are limitations to the approach of the arts as well. But I think that by engaging different mediums to talk about statelessness and to bring different perspectives in, you are actually enhancing a more holistic viewpoint of statelessness. So, for example, when I watch a play or when I read a book or when I watch a movie, a different part of my brain I feel is engaged, and it allows me to have a more honest interaction with what I'm doing. Whereas if I'm reading a report, I may be more questioning, I may be more cynical about how I approach it, or I may not see beyond the the legal analysis and the statistics and the figures. And I think you need both approaches. So we firmly believe that working through the arts is very important, and it must be. We also believe that it's not something that should happen in isolation. I think art is more powerful when art becomes part of the real world. And the work we do, the people we work with are very much part of the real world. And people themselves are all creative. Human beings are creative beasts, and you give people a chance to work with the arts, and their creativity will come out. And we saw that also in the conference that we held, where people had an opportunity to engage creatively, and that made people think more creatively themselves. And we had serious researchers reading out their poetry at the conference, for example, which you wouldn't normally see in that kind of setting. Yeah, so we work very closely with a number of stateless activists, and this is deeply important because there are very deep power imbalances in the statelessness field. I think there are very deep power imbalances in any field, and often you find that the people who by right should be at the very center are at the periphery, and they are shuttled into the center when someone needs to see their face or someone needs to hear their voice, and then they are shuttled out. And so there's this objectification of the people who actually endure the reality of statelessness on a daily basis, the people who fight the reality of statelessness on a daily basis, by an increasingly professional field. And so there's this sense of the professionals know what to do, they know how to speak at the UN, they know how to analyze laws, and the activists have to play a particular role. They have to be the victims, they have to be at a march and make a big noise, so that we can then say, oh look, these people are making a big noise, now listen to us, because we can actually analyze that big noise and we can present it to you in legal terms. But I mean, that's a nonsense. And the real experts on this issue are the people who live it. And these are not people whose only qualification is that they've lived through statelessness. These are people with incredible agency, with incredible courage, with incredible motivation, who are in this because it's their lives. One of the most inspiring people I know is a Nepali lady called Deepthi Gurung, who for 18 years was fighting on a daily basis for the citizenship of her two daughters. And after they got their citizenship, she hasn't rested. She's now fighting for the citizenship of other Nepali children. And that kind of motivation, it can only come through having lived the experience. And whenever I speak to people like Deepthi or Jabbar, who's the Parini MP I was telling you about, or members of a stateless group in America called United Stateless, or activists in the UK or Malaysia or from Myanmar, whenever I speak to them, I learn. And I learn because they have, when you're living through something that's a problem, your mind is set on finding solutions to that problem. So you actually know what needs to be done. And if we are able to listen to people who have been affected by statelessness, we will much more quickly and much more easily come to the solutions. And then it's a question of political willpower to implement those solutions.
I worry about my younger sister. I love her very much, and I wouldn't change her for anything except that this world is so cruel to girls. She has a very funny understanding of the world. She likes to believe that different countries are different colors. And I think this is because the world map in her classroom, on that the different countries are colored in different colors. And I tried to explain to her this is not really how the world is, but she really believes if from space you look back at Earth, you do see all these colors. And she loves telling people that our father is from a green country and that our mother is from a purple country, where we live, where we were born.
Opening plenary, and the opening plenary was very high profile. The keynote speaker was a former UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Under Secretary on Children in Armed Conflict. and there was the Dutch human rights ambassador and some other high-profile people on the stage, and everyone had made very serious, very good interventions, and then the stage was the audience was given a chance to ask their questions and make their comments, and a number of questions and comments actually came from stateless activists who were in the audience. So there was a guy, a Bidoon from Kuwait, who made quite a lengthy intervention, and a few others. And it's after that this performance began again in the form of a question being asked. And because I think a number of stateless people had already made interventions, the immediate assumption was this was another stateless person, a little stateless person. And so I think the audience initially was very eager to hear what this child had to say. And it was a very bold, I have a question that no one can answer, or I don't think anyone can answer. And so there was slight uncomfortable laughter in the room when that very bold statement was made to begin with. I was quite surprised when I found out that by the end of the piece there were some people who still thought that this was not a performance, because I don't know how you can watch that and think that a child would really make such a long intervention and not be interrupted by the chair and be allowed to walk up to the stage. And I mean, it was to me that was quite surprising, but it was also fantastic that happened, and that people thought that even after this 10 minutes or so of performance, that it was still potentially, or there was some doubt as to whether this was an actor or a stateless child. But I was watching, I'm familiar with the piece, so I had half an eye and half a ear on the actor, but I was also watching the audience, I was watching the people on stage, and I saw quite a number of very hardened activists with tears in their eyes. I was looking at Deepthi and Neha a lot, and I could see just how still they were and how they were taking it all in. And I think the impact that it had on the conference was really significant. And it set the tone for what was to follow. So yeah, I think it worked really well.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I asked one of those questions that I promised myself I'd never ask. Silly me. Sorry.